Trudy, do we have any ice?
You son of a bitch.
Anyway, sometime in the summer of 48, no, 1932. No, 1939.
But when I say I want the moon, I expect the moon.
Because he was caught with chewing gum on his pubis.
World handed to us on a plate, and then you swing in on a chandelier, drop your pants, and crap on it.
You're a very, very gifted storyteller.
I killed my CO.
You have lost your mind!
Where the hell are you supposed to be?
Because Scouts honor.
This is my business.
I mean business!
Hello and welcome to Blowing Smoke, the officially unofficial Mad Men podcast, where we dive into each and every episode of one of the very greatest pieces of televisual storytelling ever. So sit back, relax, and smoke 'em if you got 'em, because this right here is the Cure for the Common podcast. We're your co-hosts, Con Levi Huffman. I'm Kyle.
I'm Levi.
Here we are, ready for episode 7, Levi, of season 1, Red in the Face. Red in the Face.
This episode's kind of strange, and I actually like that Matt Zarsites wrote about it as this way of the title literally representing like the way that children act when they're embarrassed or angry or like not getting their way.
Right.
And he kind of talked about how this whole episode's especially about people who are not that are acting like adults acting like children and acting immature. I mean, literally, pretty much every single version of that is, or every single instance in this is a version of that somewhat.
Yeah, definitely the big plot lines revolve
and this was,
around
that. A lot of important information comes out about the relationship between Don and Roger, as well as, further cementing some of the behavior that is common amongst them and their peers, and as far as drunkenness and sexual harassment and various other things. It's one of the episodes I think that's very memorable from this season for the ending in particular.
Yes.
And a lot of other things as well, the chip and dip and the air rifle and all the various things. That it very does much feel like something you would read in Boy's Life, as it turns out.
Yes.
So yeah.
And one of the most striking images of this whole season is of that shot of when Pete comes home to Trudy with the gun, and it's like he's being chastised by her, and you see her off camera, or you don't see her, she's off camera.
Yeah.
But how she's berating him and how he's framed. He looks like a little boy who's in trouble, who's being yelled at by his mother. And that's just like such an endearing image, specifically of this early of Pete's character arc, especially. So again, this was Red in the Face, premiered, or I should say debuted, or first aired, Thursday, August 30th. 2007, so Levi would have just turned 9 years old. Yep. When Don invites Roger home for dinner, too much alcohol fuels repercussions between Don and Betty, and between Don and Roger. Joan puts Roger off for the weekend, spending time with her roommate Carol instead. Pete exchanges a wedding gift for a rifle and then shares a hunting fantasy with Peggy. Bertram Cooper, I love this is not Bert, but Bertram Cooper, arranges for the Nixon campaign to meet with him, Roger, Don, and Pete. So that's kind of an overview overall of what's going on here in this episode.
Yeah, and it should be said this was a higher viewership than had been since Marriage of Figaro, the third episode. It went up to 1.02 as far as a little over, a million, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And as well as that, I
think it's the Ann Wept bump.
Yeah, I said it was, paging Dr. Ann Wept. But I mean, like I joked about that, of course, but it's interesting because this is an episode that most people would have found extremely funny in a lot of ways, and is very kind of comedic. as far as other things, you also have Carol McCarty, who's Joan's roommate, is the first time she's in this. Mm-hmm. You have the Helen Bishop and Betty slap in the store.
Yeah, the slap.
You have Roger telling his World War II story. There's all kinds of actually stuff that gets fit into one episode here. The introduction of the air rifle, which will actually come into the show in and out at random times.
Yeah.
It'll
Chekhov's
keep
Pete's
showing
air
up,
rifle.
right, and it never gets shot.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
It's, yeah.
Which I feel like that in and of itself is a joke.
Yeah.
You know, a joke on the whole Chekhov's gun theory of drama, basically. Theater.
And yeah, just the that spirit of competition that comes, that we look at as like, or vendettas or whatever, you know, that used to be dealt with in different ways back in like Stone Age times, where they just murder each other, obviously. Now it's like not a whole lot more than what Childred would do, but a little more complicated. Don't you also find it, by the way, before we get into it, go ahead and say it now, that it's a little bit unrealistic, just frankly, that Don would be able to keep all of his self together, and like that he wouldn't be setting himself up for that problem.
I agree. I will say, like, as the show progresses, Don's not as able to take as much alcohol as he was here at the beginning. I feel like this is kind of him at his peak in terms of for that. But I agree. I think that it might be slightly unrealistic. And I thought it was interesting too. Seitz in Mad Men Carousel, his recap of this episode, kind of phrased that. Oh, by the way, just for the credits of this episode, let me just really briefly mention.
Tim Hunter
directed by Tim Hunter and written by Bridget Bedard, I believe is how you say her name. That it's like he very much kind of laid heavy that this more so than other episodes is an act of satire and kind of has satirical, farcical elements, sometimes more than other episodes, which I'd say in my memory largely serves as a good, apt analogy. And that, again, as you said, it's all about this inherent immaturity of everyone involved. But, again, as you said, I do think it's probably a little unrealistic that, Don's able to take all that he does. But I think, too, like, it speaks to Roger's own not ailing exactly, but just, he does have some heart problems kind of later on that this might be lightly hinting at as far as health stuff with him. Don't you think it's interesting, by the way, and we'll talk about that when we get to it, like how that's treated as like kind of a major storyline for a little while, and how over the course of the show, comparatively, that really falls off and is not all that actually prevalent.
And frankly, it almost treats him as a little bit more of an important character than he is, as far as that's concerned, too, I think, in this season.
Don't you feel like, too, that like at that later on, that storyline's almost toying with the idea of killing off Roger explicitly?
Yeah.
And we've talked about before, this is not a show that's going to lightly kill off people left and right. When it does, it's very important and impactful. And then even if that would have happened later in the show, that would have been definitely like a few seasons in a bigger deal. But I feel like it toys with that, but it doesn't fully go all the way.
Yeah.
One thing that also shocks me is that how this episode ends, that the Nixon campaign would still be like, let's, even just if nothing else, like, just the decorum of what happens, I'm like, we're going to still go with this agency as somebody who's, we're going to see what they can do to help us out.
Yeah, very strange belief system there. I'm not really, I mean, I guess they're just like, well, they made it the most memorable. I don't know. It's,
Don't you feel like this is an early warning shot of what's capable in the office, that guy walks into an advertising agency is later going to blow up in even bigger ways in terms of, because I think too, like, you just see a show like this, and when you see something outrageous like that in The Office, it seems infinitely more violent in some ways than like a murder on another show would be, because it's like, it's this office, and we have guy walks into an advertising agency, we've got like the fight, and
it's a shattering of the decorum of office life.
And I think that just comes off way more shocking,
right?
Because that's not the kind of thing that happens on Mad Men, but actually it happens more regularly than we might be willing to admit,
right?
there's probably at least one of those moments per season. Like if you really watched it and studied. I'm not off the top of my head. I'm not sure what it would be season 2. Maybe it would be. It is season 2 where they're trying to court Hilton, I believe, isn't it? Or is that season 3? Season 3. I was gonna say like that shock of. Well, it is season 2 where they're doing the American Airlines like possibility that they can get them, and what Pete's wearing in that episode when he's got to come into the office. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
That in and of itself is one of the most shocking. Yeah. Just oh my god. Look
that
at moments.
as well as Duck has a couple things here and there.
Yes, Duck.
He makes that dog leave that time. I know nobody's there to really see that, but like Then of course you have later where like Sally's running around and falls down and like that whole thing. I mean, so there's different moments throughout the show, and then of course the even later in the show you have Ginsburg cutting his nipple off. Like there's all kinds of
If you're
random...
just watching this for the first time, you're like, wait, what? Who's Ginsburg and why does he cut his nipple off? Right. We'll get there one day, don't worry.
Yeah, but anyway, like there's a random amount of stuff that's like, oh wow, that happened. Even the Hershey's pitch, like, is it literally like madness. And then when Don, okay, I'm gonna stop with this one, but when Don's like, "Get out of my office now," to those people, it's like you don't do that. It's just
beginning of season 4. Yeah.
Anyway, or you had the balls to walk back in here after you embarrassed yourselves or whatever. Yeah.
Unless we have anything else to preview about this episode, is there anything else?
No.
Speaking of nipples / body parts being cut off, David Lynch just passed away.
I thought you were gonna for a second just leave it at David Lynch. Like
David Lynch, I get, just passed away. I believe at the age of 78.
Oh, 79. Is it 79?
I think he was literally almost 79.
Oh.
Like he was literally 5 days away. Tomorrow, okay. We're recording this on January 19th. His birthday would be tomorrow, January 20th. Passed away. Now, obviously, this is a Mad Men podcast. It's going to tie into Mad Men, though. Don't worry, because there's actually a connection to be made.
Also, if you don't like that, then just tune the hell off.
But I would imagine if you're a fan of Mad Men or open to Mad Men, then you're probably a fan of and or open to David Lynch as an experience.
And Twin Peaks specifically.
Where do we even begin to process this? Because this is something that obviously has dominated us and film Twitter and the film world for the last few days.
I think it's very easy to say that he's the single most influential and important American art house filmmaker of all time. Somebody who was able to pierce through popular culture in a way that was so not only transgressive but just visible. And
I think the most transgressive thing about him was how visible he was.
Yeah, which is something that obviously were his movies wildly popular? No, but
were his movies wild at heart? Well, one of them.
Well, and I was going to say even Wild at Heart won the Palme d'Or at Cannes.
It was a movie that was just by virtue of it existing how it did when it did would have been rented by millions of Americans even still and called on TV by millions of Americans. So I mean, even a movie as crazy as that was still.
Well, and even a movie like Blue Velvet was such a big deal at the time that people were like, "Whoa, have you seen this? Like, this is so crazy." Even more than Eraserhead was, obviously, because that kind of spent a long time on the midnight circuit, became a cult movie, and then became famous for being not famous. But yeah, Blue Velvet, and of course Dune was a big thing, and The Elephant Man even is being Oscar, in the Oscar race, and there are a lot of fingerprints of him all over the place, and just by nature of him being so popular through Twin Peaks, I mean is one of the most popular TV shows
I would
ever.
think that has to, by virtue of what it is, have to be the most widely seen thing he's ever done in some capacity. Obviously, the show was massively popular when it was on, and then has just been seen by even more people over the years. Mm-hmm. I know, there's a lot of places to go and talk about with David Lynch, because one is like, and I say this as a huge Twin Peaks fan, like there's almost part of me that's like, no, he did other things other than Twin Peaks, okay? But I think what people are responding to when Twin Peaks comes up is how, obviously we weren't alive when it debuted, but we can look back now and situate its place in popular culture and definitely talk to people who, when it, like, knew it was who were around when it was this new thing, that it was just so instantly iconic. And I think there's so few things that exist now or even then that it pops into the popular culture and it immediately makes an impact. It immediately makes a timestamp and will forever be remembered and be this massively important thing. And I think that's why, and I, even as a fan of Twin Peaks, I'm like, well, he did all these other things, but Twin Peaks really is one of those, like, nuclear exploding moments, literally and figuratively, in people's minds over the years that opened up so many people to so many different things. So I think that's obviously, it's a credit to that show, and obviously Mark Frost also, and all the other collaborators who were a part of that show, because I feel like we can't forget him and his relationship to it. And then all I'll say is, like, we're going to talk a little bit about Lynch here, obviously. Go back, and if you've ever listened to Overlapping Dialogue or haven't, we did a episode on Fire Walk with Me where we kind of in depth talked about Lynch and Twin Peaks and Fire Walk with Me, and then also The Return. I know I can speak for Levi when I say, when The Return aired on a weekly basis over the course of the summer of 2017, that was like one of the most signature, I'll never forget where I was in this moment, like, times of popular culture, of the week to week of watching that show, trying to figure out what it was going on, the internet's parsing of it, and then the ultimate conclusion of it was really like, there's nothing we're ever going to have again that grabs you that strongly and makes an impact like that. And obviously, I don't think The Return was, obviously, if you look at the numbers, as seen as the original Twin Peaks was, by virtue of, Twin Peaks was on ABC, a massive network. Right. It still broke through and is still, like, I think one of those things that an above average amount of people either saw some portion of or were interested in. So, again, that's the thing with him, is he was a part of so many things, not just as a filmmaker, but as obviously a fine artist, a musician, even just a personality who every once in a while showed up on the Cleveland Show of all things. He's one of the rare, like, filmmakers who also becomes, there's been a lot said about this, who becomes a verb, becomes an adjective. Like, Lynchian is this word that describes what David Lynch-esque work. And there's been so many bad imitators, but there's really no one who can do what he did at the level that he did. Yeah. We could create a whole podcast dedicated to everything that's associated with David Lynch. It's just so wide-ranging. What do you think his legacy is? Like, what does that even amount to, trying to put into words?
I think obviously, for people who know who he is, his legacy is substantial. I think I don't actually take a whole lot of sadness in, I actually think this is a success, is that a great deal of his actual influence will be something that exists primarily in the culture as a kind of mystery, or things that most average people will not be aware of his influence, but it is so indelible and noted in its the things that it did influence, that they are finding him in various places without knowing it. Yeah. And so I think that's, for somebody who's so spiritual in and of himself, I think that's something Lynch would take a lot of comfort in knowing, is that even if he wasn't ever like Steven Spielberg, he was still influencing the way that movies are made and the way that stories are told, and surrealism in a modern sense is experimented with, is all comes from him, and that he's, fine with that. Like, and as an example, somebody like John Waters, who I like his films, what I've seen, does not hold a candle to Lynch in the sense that his films are often not actually really that influential in terms of film grammar and thematics. They are very just transgressive for transgressive's sake, and are very much something that is more out of the mainstream, obviously. whereas Lynch was making things that were in the mainstream. I mean, Twin Peaks was a mainstream television show. On ABC. Blue Velvet, for a very brief moment, was a mainstream film in the terms of people renting it and watching it and seeing it, and being aware of it.
I think between say 1986 and 1992, Lynch was the most exciting director in the world, not just America. I mean, there was this particular moment of time where he literally kind of held a special place in the culture between Blue Velvet, between obviously the premiere of Twin Peaks and what that represented, even Wild at Heart, and then even Fire Walk with Me, which, as we've talked about, is on that podcast, was very maligned and misunderstood at the time. And I'll be honest, when I first saw the movie, I was not a huge lover of it. But now, with every passing year, I'm like, oh, okay, I kind of really grapple with and understand what it is. And there's been a lot of people, it seems like, really holding that up as maybe his crown jewel achievement. And then I think the thing is, too, that's there's something he made that most film literate people have a love for something in there. Yeah. I think most of us would agree his Dune is among the weakest films of his filmography.
I think that's one of the worst movies ever made, frankly. So, yeah. And that's fine, though, because he didn't really want to do it. Pretty much wanted his name off of the movie and was like, I didn't enjoy this, and no.
And that experience in of itself led to Blue Velvet, which is, it's tough. I could go between a few things. I think there's an argument to be made the greatest film of the 80s, and I think most powerful film of what it's saying about America and American culture of that particular time and moment, that it's, I can't remember exactly what he said. Jay Hoberman wrote a really terrific obituary for him in the New York Times, which I'd encourage everybody to read. And he was obviously one of his biggest early champions with the cult movies in general, and not Elephant Man, but Eraserhead.
Yeah.
And he kind of, I don't remember exactly how Jay Hoberman phrased it, but basically said the dark side of It's Morning Again in America vibe of the 80s with the Reagan era. That movie has a legitimate shot at being the best film of that entire decade from any nation. And I don't know, everybody's going to have their favorite little thing that he did, or multiple things, because obviously we're pretty big fans across most of his stuff. Obviously Twin Peaks is way, way up there, and that almost seems like it's, obviously he's a filmmaker behind that, making it he's a filmmaker making a televisual product, but it's television. Nothing against it. It's just that's just a slightly other thing, even though Fire Walk with Me interacts with that. For me personally, it's somewhere. It's it's either Blue Velvet or Mulholland Drive as far as this film goes, because that's also an amazing movie that kind of, I think, finished 8th in Sight and Sound's top 100 of just this last 2-3 years ago. Yeah. That was number 8th all time. I think that was the newest movie that was on the Sight and Sound list. And so it's, I don't know, we could just talk at length about every one of his things he did, and I don't think we're going to get into that now. But when you just think about, if you had to recommend for somebody the David Lynch aesthetic, or recommend a movie to them, or that doesn't have to be typified like the David Lynch thing, but just what are the special things that you feel like you're always going to go back to and remember from him and his work?
I think, you talked a lot about Blue Velvet, and I don't want to leave out movies like Eraserhead, Mulholland Drive. Even, I should say, I think that Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me is his most well-made work. Looks amazing. Yeah. Is his best-looking film.
Obviously,
by far,
Cheryl Lee's performance has naturally been probably the greatest performance in any of his films. It's up there with, Naomi Watts in Mulholland Drive, and you got Dennis Hopper in Blue Velvet.
So I don't want to leave all those things out, or even Lost Highway, which is a wickedly entertaining bunch of nonsense. Is just really something special. And Twin Peaks, of course. I everybody says it, but I truly do think watching episode 8 of The Return live was an experience that I can't really put into words about what that
especially
even,
like we're Twin Peaks fans, but we weren't there for the original
No.
show. Obviously, we're watching after the fact, but we watched that live, and we'll always remember
Yeah.
that feeling. Yeah.
And I'll actually come back to talk about one thing about Twin Peaks about it before, or at the end after I talk about Blue Velvet here that I want to say, but Blue Velvet I think really represents something to me in terms of, and I should say my first David Lynch experience was watching Twin Peaks all the way through, and then the first real David Lynch movie I saw was Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me. So that's already kind of like a losing battle there to say, okay, this is my first David Lynch movie, and it's like, and I'm like, oh, what is this? This isn't Twin Peaks. It's not the, stupid things to say. But also I should say I was 16, 17 years old. I mean, but then I saw Blue Velvet, and I think that's probably your first that you had seen.
That was the very first one I saw.
And I saw Blue Velvet and liked it okay. I remember you weren't as big of a fan of it when you first saw it.
Now it's literally my top 10 favorite movies.
And I liked it better than you did at the time, and I was kind of like, there's something interesting going on here. Obviously,
about these ants.
Right, but yeah. Love that in-camera zoom of the dog biting the water hose spray, by the way, in-camera zoom. Yeah. But I think, seeing that movie again and again, and that was right on the precipice of me going to, I saw that in 2015, the spring of 2015, right on the precipice of me going to Wilmington to school,
that was, of course, filmed.
Where it was filmed, and even further cultivating my taste for different types of movies happening there where that movie was shot, and actually seeing places where the movie was filmed. Like there's that it wasn't actually filmed in that, the apartment itself was not in that building.
Oh, yeah.
But there's the building, it's right, if you ever are there and you go to the Bellamy Mansion, which I've randomly been to like 3 or 4 times over the course of going down there for various reasons. If you stand there in the second floor and look out the window, you're literally going to see it. It's it's like the dark building across the street where they filmed the exteriors of Isabella Rossellini's apartment. And just standing there and seeing it, what it looked like, and just being in that city at that time in my life, and seeing that movie multiple times. I guess a way to say, and obviously going and seeing his other films and catching up on all of his stuff, it still felt like Blue Velvet was the most important thing in its own way that I'd ever seen. And like I said, that was a very specific moment to have been in that, to have seen that movie right before going there and been there, and even just to say briefly, this doesn't really have a connection to this, but Dr. Frank, who was a film studies professor there, actually passed away within about 2 weeks of the class that I was in that she was teaching. And she was a massive David Lynch fan and actually kind of come to Wilmington because of Blue Velvet, and really wish I could have got to talk to her about that, because I would have been very interested to hear her opinions on that. And that's another thing that's connected in my mind to that in its own way, is her love of that, and knowing that was why she was there, and that was not why I was there. But in its own way, that movie benefiting from the film culture of Wilmington, and film culture of Wilmington benefiting from it after, So that's a very specific kind of recommendation, is Blue Velvet.
Another thing,
also because I think it's his best film that he's made. But go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, like, a particular for me too, when I watched Blue Velvet, which I said would be in my top 10 favorite films ever now, is Laura Dern, which who of course was a key collaborator in a lot of various Lynch projects over the years. The way she looks in that movie was shot in like 85, was when my mother graduated from high school, and really that time. And so to see Laura Dern in that movie, I mean, you see pictures of our own mother. There's a certain, I literally see our mom a little bit when I watch that movie as well. And that movie even too introduced me to Dennis Hopper as an experience, which that goes beyond just the Lynch filmography, of course.
Yeah, Dennis Hopper. That probably other than American Carol, which is its own laughter, I know, but was the first time I ever really saw Dennis Hopper in it. Or that I shouldn't say. I probably saw him in something else. But because I would have seen the Super Mario Brothers also. But basically what I'm trying to say is I knew him as, he's that guy that's in that movie Blue Velvet.
Right.
Like, even before I saw the movie.
Before you saw Easy Rider or any of that. Like,
yeah. Yeah, I'm trying to think when I saw Easy Rider for the first time. I don't really remember.
It would honestly be easy for a lot of people to not even know that's exactly the same guy, because especially in Easy Rider's got long hair and facial hair. And
I think I saw Easy Rider probably around that same time, more than likely, or maybe a little before. I don't know, but anyway, yeah.
I think, and so Blue Velvet is personally my single favorite thing he did. However, I think that was like the kernel of what Twin Peaks grew in.
Yeah.
I feel like Twin Peaks is the, like, in some ways, like, more successful child of Blue Velvet, because it's literally taking what Blue Velvet was and expanding it greatly, obviously, in terms of the horrors of the small town America. And it's been pointed out by a lot of people, and I'm glad that this is... I mean, I feel like people have been saying this for years about Lynch, but in the wake of his passing, one thing that's really been talked a lot about is he's known as being the surrealist, avant-garde, transgressive artist, but he loves America. He loves small-town America. He loves the fact that he was an Eagle Scout and a Boy Scout. Right. And you remember that scene in particular in The Return where, like, we're waiting and waiting and waiting for Dougie Jones to finally break out of his stupor and, or we should say Cooper to break out of the stupor of being Dougie Jones.
Stupor.
Yeah. And there's that one scene where, like, there's like the American flag, and he's like sitting in an office basically, and there's like the American flag, and there's like I don't remember if it's the Star Spangled Banner. There's some like very lightly patriotic music playing in the background or whatever. And I mean, David Lynch was deep down a very corny middle America Boy Scout child, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Who happened to really love like art. A lot of his personal fine art's been compared a lot to Francis Bacon, and you can definitely see a lot of that in there. That just, again, like Blue Velvet, like Twin Peaks did, was pick at the heart of the American experience. And I think, there, again, just to sum him up in one brief podcast snippet for an episode of a Mad Men episode is, might seem like a strange thing to do, but considering this is the podcast we're doing in the immediate aftermath of that, we wanted to shout him out.
Yeah. He was a Mad Men fan.
That's what we were going to talk about. So he loved Mad Men. Oh, wait, this isn't the thing I was wanting to see. He was a Mad Men fan because...
Seen somebody took like the Mad Men logo, made it his head.
Yeah,
like,
his hair, you can see there. A lot of people have been saying, well, maybe the greatest head of hair of all time. Definitely like one of the hairs of all time.
Yeah.
This is a quote he gave back, I think it's from like 2011, so it was some time ago, back when Mad Men was first airing for Shortlist.com. I like Mad Men. They're great characters, and whoever cast that show did a sensational job. It's great writing, great atmosphere. And then he talks about meeting John Hamm and Elizabeth Moss.
Mm-hmm.
I had the opportunity to meet Peggy Olson and Don Draper. And yes, apparently he called them by their character names. It says, that's who they are to me. I call Peggy, Peggy. Then it says, did she mind? It says, no, not a bit. I met them in Cologne, Germany, and my wife and I had drinks with Peggy in Paris. And then Elizabeth Moss later told a story on Jimmy Kimmel where she was telling her side of it. Said he called them by their names, Don and Peggy. He emailed her afterwards. He wrote, Dear Peggy, and then emailed her, and then finished it with Give My Love to Don. So David Lynch, great Mad Men fan.
Yeah.
Maybe it would do you have anything else to say about Lynch in general, other than so much that we're not going to be able to fit into this one podcast?
Just I mean, he is truly somebody that is, it's a word that gets thrown around a lot, but he just truly had a vision that was of the world that was different.
I mean,
than
when
everybody
you
else,
see
and-
movies today market from the visionary director of like,
Yeah.
it's like, no, stop using that word.
Yeah.
You're not David Lynch. Like David Lynch is, like you said, he is the definition of a visionary. We've hinted at it here and there, like obviously talking about Twin Peaks in relation to Mad Men. I mean, Twin Peaks is a TV show when it first aired, like it was kind of the very first spark that eventually by the end of the decade, The Sopranos really carried the torch of certain aspects of Twin Peaks in terms of TV being taken more seriously and to make it this appointment viewing. But like Twin Peaks really does exist on its own wavelength, totally. I feel like some of the most superficial comparisons that could be made between Twin Peaks, and Mad Men are there's dream sequences, but obviously that is more of a fundamental part of the Twin Peaks experience than it is with Mad Men. I'm actually glad Mad Men didn't. I mean, I think the thing about Mad Men is
Sopranos did that a lot too.
Well, Sopranos did it,
and he was
bit.
a big fan of Lynch.
David Chase was,
yeah.
Lynch. Mad Men does dream sequences or things more so in this like altered states is like more so how it channels some of that stuff than it is purely usually someone's literal dream is being had. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, like, again, I don't want to overemphasize it because I think that Twin Peaks is more influential in a lot of other shows than it is in Mad Men exactly. But, like, what for you relationships exist between these two things? Or maybe even your own viewing of television. What place do these two shows hold in relation to each other for you?
I think, obviously, they're very different things. I don't try to compare them particularly. And because one is very much an explicit comedy / horror thing that has a very specific tone.
Right.
But I also think they're both all about nostalgia and, about Americana in various ways. And so, I mean, and obviously that popularized actual serialized drama storytelling, which is something that Mad Men would obviously benefit from, that was not really the norm pre-1990, really at all. So
I agree. Like I said, I don't want to overemphasize the relationship those shows had to each other, but I just do think that they are often put in a certain box together that, again, I think Weiner said things about David Lynch that he loved or he admired him as an artist and all, but he didn't really talk about him a lot in terms of explicitly being an influence on Mad Men in the same way that David Chase talked about, being a frustrated TV writer in the late 80s, early 90s, and then Twin Peaks comes out. I think that was something that more so than in content, more so in just pure inspiration, was like, oh, finally a TV show that's like doing something different. You know what I mean? And in that way, The Sopranos carried the torch for that in the way that later on Mad Men would take the torch from The Sopranos, is more so that. But rest in peace, David Lynch. One of the greats in everything he did. Smoking, art, really everything. He was one of our true heroes.
Unfortunately, it was smoking that did him in. So
there's a lot been said about when it was announced he had emphysema, I believe, last year, and his statement about it was like, I don't regret smoking, but I just think people should know that this could happen. And it was like,
it's almost like he's living in the 50s. He's like, did you know that smoking? It's like,
did you know?
Thank you, David.
Yeah,
I appreciate it.
Yeah.
I gotta say,
the most distinctive voice.
Maybe the last thing I'll say.
Yeah.
I'll go back to Twin Peaks real quick. Two things. Number one, the kind of third episode of the show is where they had that dream in the Black Lodge for the first time.
Right. Yeah.
And I remember sitting and watching that. I'd actually gotten a flu shot that I had a kind of minor reaction to earlier that day.
Yeah.
And then I was sitting watching it, and I was like, and that whole moment happened, and I was like, this is the single weirdest thing I've ever seen. I was like, and that was a big moment for me where I was like, I totally love this show. This is amazing. But I think, part of his greatest work he's ever done, very specifically, and it's a specific joke that shouldn't be funny, is just the whole Gordon Cole character as somebody who is hard of hearing and just screams all the time. And it's just very simple, but actually really hilarious, like, joke that I don't think gets enough credit. Just the idea of I'm going to play this person who screams to talk.
We didn't. I just realized I don't think we've said literally even just said it out loud. Inland Empire, even just acknowledge
or the straight
that
story, I guess.
I think you said the straight story earlier, just real quickly. But Inland Empire, what a movie! I've still not rewatched it, especially since there was a Criterion that came out a few years ago, and I bought it, and I need to rewatch it now. But wow! But I think I guess formally that's his last film.
Yeah,
that was made. Obviously, The Return's his last real thing, and then also his.
Well, what would Jack do?
Well, there's that. That's a short film. Technically, that's true. But I think, to tie it back, and I think Huberman did a great job with this in his obituary. The last real shot we had at seeing him was in The Fabelmans as, of all people, John Ford. And I think there's a lot of people that who might see that who don't totally know who that is, but who's that guy?
He's funny.
Just very memorable.
No. Where's the horizon? Like, but
all those, and again, Lynch wasn't exactly New Hollywood. He was obviously totally his own thing, but I mean, that generation of guys are more and more passing us by. So it's got to appreciate them while we have them for sure.
Yeah, Hal Ashby. I'm just glad he's still living, cause
he was dead by like the 80s.
I know. R.I.P. Hal Ashby.
I know, he's an amazing director. R.I.P. to him.
But anyway.
Anyways, you know what? I think I'm going to end this episode. I'll just go ahead and say it with David Lynch's story about seeing Bob Dylan to tie it into last episode. We were talking about Bob Dylan. Obviously, hilarious story that you'll hear then. That whole
it has to do with the J. Giles Band.
God, what was that documentary that was taken from?
David Lynch, The Art Life.
The Art Life was the name of it. Also, if you've never read Room to Dream, I would highly recommend that. That's really terrific, half biography, half memoir, where he had a writer come in and basically write about him. And there's some chapters and moments that are not the most flattering thing in the world about him, specifically some of his relationships.
Yeah.
And then he kind of comes in after every chapter is like, I remember things this way or that way. It's like the perfect David Lynch biography, because it's like, maybe this, maybe that, I don't know. It's just like, it's actually a really terrific book. I'd recommend people read. But anyways, this episode is brought to you by Funny Face. An ad that I recently found. What were your thoughts on this ad, Levi, before we...
I mean, it's annoying as hell, and it's pretty racist, so that pretty much summarizes the 60s.
I mean, yeah. And I even told Levi, I was like, we could edit that. No, I mean, this is the time period. This is what it is.
Well, I mean, then they later talk about this in terms of the Native American representation. I mean, that's later a really big thing in the whole, that's those, what is it called? Snowball. Ice cream?
Yeah, where you're like, there's a snowball that's just like hitting random people. It's like,
and like, cop, Indian chief, all those things. It's very like, okay. And then there's that thing where, Don's like doing his impression of the devil. He's like, this could change everything. Like, it's very like, okay. But yeah, there's also an Asian stereotype in this, so yeah, sorry about that. But
I mean, one thing that
I didn't do it, so
yeah, one thing that I think directly ties is like it's childlike, it's idiotic, like the characters in the show very often.
Yeah.
So we're gonna take a brief station break, and then we'll be right back with our commentary.
It's time for Friday!
Howdy! Grapes, the name. Goofy Grape. Though why they call me Goofy, I don't know. Yes, sir. I'm one of the new funny-faced drinks from Pillsbury.
Funny faces, fancy drink.
One of the new funny-faced drinks. Here's what you do. You pour me into a pitcher, add water, don't add sugar. I'm already sweet when you buy me. You can drink all you want. Mom won't mind. 'Cause look, Mom, I'm pre-sweetened without sugar. And so are my friends. Injun Orange. Oh. Rootin' Tootin' Raspberry.
Yahoo!
Freckle-faced Strawberry.
Hi.
Chinese Cherry. And Loudmouth Lime. Hello, hello, hello. Look for us at your store. Funny-faced drinks from Pillsbury.
Funny faces, fancy drink.
We're sweet without sugar, so no sugar mess.
And we're back. Again, as always, we're watching the Blu-ray, hitting play in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. He's still waiting for something to happen in that room. And he's falling down. Guest starring Robert Morse. Special guest appearance by John Slattery. Still not regular cast member at this point. Mad Men. What are they going to do now? They're so mad.
They're mad all the time.
I mean, literally, take a chill pill.
Real like, oh yeah, remember the psychiatrist stuff?
Mm-hmm. Well, at first it could be, oh, is this one of his of his women? Oh no, it's now if they would have had a relationship, that would have been a little different.
Mostly, she seems consumed with petty jealousies and overwhelmed with everyday activities. Basically, we're dealing with the emotions of a child.
Wow.
She wasn't always like this. But we're finding that this kind of anxiety is not uncommon in housewives. And let's not forget the death of the parent is extremely destabilizing. So that's it. Well, that's the beginning, certainly.
I love that it's like, I didn't really care when my dad died, but whatever. I love it's like they're deeper issues. Like you can't give her medicine and make it go away. Like we've got to like talk it out and figure it out. Oh my god.
Time and talk, that's what I recommend right now. And again, evenings are better for me. Well, I appreciate your time.
That's such a really old, weird idea of just like, I'm going to talk to the man about what I think. Because it's really like, why? Like, I mean, I know back then why, but.
I love the design of the Smirnoff bottles.
Yeah.
Ultimate Fighting Championship.
Yeah.
Reference to Nixon, the piano player.
Yeah.
Stop smoking so much. It's a sign of weakness. You know how people have got Neville Chamberlain?
Oh, this little story here.
He held a conference at an old palace that forbid smoking. And after an hour and a half of not smoking.
You know, it is interesting. Obviously, Burt Cooper, from an older generation, doesn't smoke or drink nearly as much as Roger did.
This head tilt.
Yeah.
Good night, Peanut. He's like, yeah, I'm Peanut. I am Peanut.
I am Peanut.
I am no
What if that's
Peanut.
actually his middle name that's revealed later? Roger Peanut Sterling.
Just a reminder.
Yeah. I don't think we really get much movement at where we left off last time with Peggy kind of going to be working in creative in this
Not
episode.
yet,
Yeah.
Right now, she's just doing it on her own time. So
Yeah.
bring the heiress. I know you're talking about his daughter, but
Pretend it's VJ Day.
she's a L.A. Noire character. by the
Oh,
way.
yeah. I knew she looked familiar from something else.
Well, it's not really kosher right now, dog. Dang. Donald. The Donald.
The Donald. That's honestly like so funny to me.
Yeah.
But the first really Peggy Roger interaction. There's a lot of great ones later on, but. Kind of almost feel bad for Pete. But oh well, I know he'll squander it in 2 seconds. Oh, well, I'm going to abuse you now.
Thingy. Hildy.
She's his secretary for quite a while. Surprisingly, they don't have a relationship. So.
We're all in this together. I mean, same era of being in it together.
This is funny. It's like Roger's just like milking, like, oh, I'm all alone.
Yeah.
I need to hang out with somebody. Joan's busy. All right, let's go drinking for a little bit. Oh, let me come home with you too. Like,
All right, creep.
makes it even creepier.
Yeah.
I was in a good mood till you mentioned her, that child I live with.
Yeah. Margaret, stop eating.
Yeah, come on.
He didn't exactly invite himself, I will say. Not quite.
Yeah. I mean, one could argue he subtly does, but it is slight. Oh, they're looking at him, not me. I'm the silver fox.
My eyes are burning. That's impossible. Why?
Don't do gymnastics in the house. Well, if he just stood there for a second, like, all right, you talk again.
The eyeball.
Mm-hmm.
Good looking steak.
Yeah. She gave up hers for him.
Yeah. Bible camp. Adult fat camp.
So all the drinking they've been doing all
Yeah.
day, and it's like, we're gonna have a bottle of wine also during dinner now too. Like,
We used to swim in a quarry. Huh. By the way, you drop your G's every once in a while. Never thought you were raised on farm. Sometimes with a swimming hole.
And she's like, ooh, maybe he'll say something.
You said we go to a commercial break. Brought to you by more liquor.
Wow.
you men, always the drinking.
Don't tell me it's your anniversary. No.
Don't worry, Callie got this frosting machine.
Mommy and Dad.
Remember those used to be big as a kid, even in our
Yeah.
generation. Those like little, make a easy bake oven or whatever they called them. Like,
Yeah.
used to remember seeing ads for those on
Yeah.
like Nickelodeon.
Now nobody cares about cooking anymore.
Never understood that. Is that like 3 on a horse?
French war. First war. They used to say, first man lights up, they notice you. Second man, Jerry takes aim. Third one, he was aim. Professional wisdom says that one of our guys came up with that as a way to sell matches. You tell your kids there's no sanitizer?
He'd never do that.
He's like,
Tell us another
don't
true one.
think it. Don't say what I will do or won't do.
Yeah.
Well, my father was in the trenches. With a bayonet. Think about that. Poking the man to death 3 feet away from you.
Poking him in.
Yeah.
What does that sound like?
Don never talked about the war.
War? Here's the way to do. Not much to say. You boys used up all the glory. We did, didn't we?
Well, also mine is a little complicated.
Yeah.
My biggest hit came when we were running oil down to the islands in the South China Sea.
This scene is really good writing, and
Yeah.
especially in terms of parsing out just little things about Don's backstory. Like,
Yeah.
oh, I was in a quarry, and obviously hinting at his Korean War, experience or history.
Not much.
Now you have to tell us.
Well, the third day we picked up a dyno circling the Congo. A recon plane. They were mapping us for the NIP suicide.
Roger is a very, very, very gifted storyteller.
Yeah.
As Don is also.
Made us feel good to know we had such a dedicated enemy.
That's one way of thinking about it.
Maybe I was bored and I thought, we should get that little plane. Bored? What about scared? It never comes into these stories. You're making me look bad in front of the lady.
That's impossible.
Don't worry, you'll do it yourself here in about 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Right at 12 o'clock. He was going away from us, but we hit him. I watched him dive into the waves just beyond the horizon. It was strange because we knew it was over.
It should be said also that right around this time, John Slattery was in Flags of Our Fathers, the Clint Eastwood movie, where he plays this like salesman guy who's going to help sell that image, and he's like this propagandist basically. He's got a small role. It's not in it very much, but right around this time.
Oh, that's something.
But they gave you a medal. He did. But not for that, it was for drinking. Something you know about this.
And later on, there's hints about Roger being a boxer
Yeah.
while he was in the Navy.
More liquor.
I don't care if it has ants in it.
Roger, please, the kid.
Speaking of kids,
Yeah.
I'm going to act like one.
Sally will be having her taking session with.
Make sure you tell her I ate the M and Mom. I think you've had 2 babies.
Don't do that.
You're making eyes at me all night. You can't tell me that I won't give you hot pants. Who smells? Look good.
I can make more coffee.
I just want you to know that when I go to sleep tonight, I will be thinking all about you.
Wow. I mean, already crossed the line in a variety of ways,
Yeah.
but especially that line alone. Like, Well, it went by the Bishop household.
You're with me a bon voyage. I'm just saying what a lucky man you are. Beautiful children. Enjoy it.
Mine's not beautiful anymore.
Yeah.
Tomorrow they come and tell you your kid's been born. Next thing you know, they're heading off to college.
That's another thing too. You know, the whole idea. I think that was a shocking thing about in season 3 when Eugene's born or Gene's born that you know, Don wouldn't be in the you know, in the delivery room with Betty. You know, that because I think that's something that we all take for granted now. Old men are with their wives, and that was something that was obviously not common back then.
Magical night.
Yeah, we'll never forget it. I always remember that striking red door.
Yeah.
That they have.
That's my car. There you go.
So he's going to drive all the way back to New
Yeah.
York City in that car? Like,
I don't even know how he
perfect.
made it. Yeah.
I love that. That's like, there's a lot of one-way phone call conversations in the show. That's like a version of it.
Yeah.
All right, let's deal with this.
That. Him.
What was his deal,
Yeah.
Betty?
Left here with that bottle.
That's ridiculous.
Bullshit.
Nothing happened, Don. Other than your drunk boss ruining our evening. Can we leave it at that?
You seem to be having a grand time.
I like the wine.
You made a fool of yourself.
Why would you say that?
You were throwing yourself at him, giggling at his stories.
I was being friendly. He's your boss.
I don't like to be treated that way in my own home. I know what I saw.
I don't like you being fake nice in your own
Yeah.
home. It's like, what?
Did that make you feel better?
That's kind of a early moment of making us realize actually that he's not really a violent
He's
man.
not. He does
Like,
not physically
no,
abusive.
no,
The closest we ever get is like him and Megan later
Right.
on.
And sometimes he'll do little stuff like that with.
Yeah. But he's more emotional. He's more into the
Right.
emotional abuse, you know.
Well, I guess he kind of acts like that whole situation where he pulls a Donald Trump with old Jimmy Barrett's wife, but, you know.
Yeah, and I'm not saying this is right, but he does
Norman
not.
Mailer reference.
She's not even married to him, so like he just sees her. That's those interactions.
Yeah, right,
are, now I'm
right,
not saying that's
right.
right.
No,
but
yeah,
I'm
but
saying
yeah, I
it's
know
not
what you
his
mean. Yeah,
wife.
right.
Like we'll cross that bridge later.
Yeah. So this apparently it said we were reading was actually a wedding gift for Matthew Weiner's parents.
Yes.
I don't know what to say. You got two of me?
I mean, this looks like perfect 50s era kitsch
Yeah.
item.
You have your friends over, you put chips on the sides and
That's a great piece of.
Yeah.
I like that. I know that even they're looking at this as corny, even
Yeah.
men, but
sour cream, these little brown onions. Very good.
You'll have to give me that recipe sometime.
It costs $22.
Shit.
So, I'm going to return it.
Today? Freddie Robinson's cousin works at General Mills. We're all going to Ratazi's for lunch. Maybe dinner.
No. Return this.
No.
Today, she said, I'm sure.
I like doing things for her.
You're right. I'm sorry. When you finish shopping, come join us. I hear they make a great grasshopper. Mildred.
Mildred.
I love this season especially. I really love this married life
Yeah.
thing. It's, you
That
know,
very quickly deteriorates.
yeah.
Oh my gosh. Like, what is that green thing sitting there?
I've wondered that. I don't know what that is.
It's like one of those topaz pantyhose little boxes, like,
Yeah.
from later in the show.
Those are nice pinstripe.
Something
blazer.
for the golf bag.
Now, don't you feel like what's eventually going to happen here? Don hatches a very Tony Soprano
Yeah.
plot to like humiliate someone because that's something
Yeah.
Tony was always into.
When a man gets to the point when his name's on the building, he can get it.
Oh yeah, we know that's an obsession of Rogers. In fact, his
Yeah.
name's on the building,
You know, you make it
like Buddy Cheryl.
Yeah.
of Cheryl's furniture
Yeah,
fame. Like,
I do that.
One night years ago, I got very drunk.
you point up at the Hudson Middle School signs like, you see my name up there?
Yeah, no, I point at it on the wall where my diploma's at.
Oh, yeah.
Walking down the hall.
Love, this is his excuse.
Yeah.
I remember how ugly it was. Suddenly my key won't fit the door. Where's my building? Well, I guess what I'm saying is, at some point, we've all parked in the wrong garage. Excellent. Well, and? Basically, my class back.
This is like this is kind of the beginning of a rift that's going to last really through
Season
the end of
3.
season 3.
Yeah.
Because honestly, earlier had kind of forgotten how long it really goes
Yeah.
on, but
But yeah, because there's that whole moment. I think it's in the second season, or maybe at the end of this season. I think it's in the second season where he's like, "I want no more contact with Roger Sterling."
it's when he's forced to sign the
Right.
contract before they do the deal with PPL. I always remember these random bit part actors being really good in this scene, like all these, and then his buddy that comes up in a
Yeah.
second.
Stone Cooper. He's a BBDO, media buyer, Jim Wallace. Don't know him. That's because you hear it much.
BBDO. They talk about them here and there.
Yeah.
Obviously, a lot of the big ones.
Suggested people register to avoid duplications. You did register. You got two.
Is
Have your receipt. It was a gift. Rosemary, we have a bridal register.
that talking about BBDO, obviously Sterling Cooper, McCann Erickson, Cutler Gleason and Shaw. But I think BBDO and McCann were
Yes,
actual ones.
yes.
The other ones are not.
Yeah.
But McCann, I think, still is a company, isn't it? I'm
I
pretty
think
sure.
so, McCann Erickson,
Yeah.
yeah.
There's nothing here. Perhaps her wife told you she was registering in
Well, it's like, there's nothing here. Well, this is here, so
It's Vogel. Why would you do that? Humps. Humps the Camel Campbell. Matherton.
Matherton, Carlton.
It's the whole, like, Dartmouth, like,
Yeah.
goob machine.
Goob
like,
tube.
Yeah. I mean, they all literally look the same. They're like the generation of white men, like, that just got their hair slicked back looking like this.
Yeah.
I love he's always trying to sell people on what the chip and the appeal
But he
of the
has
chip and
two,
dip.
though.
Yeah.
It's a beaut. Hell of a wedding, by the way. Your cousin Bethany? Bridesmaids. Connecticut College for Women, indeed.
Anyway, Connecticut College for Women,
Don't you
indeed.
feel like that? I know it's not as crazy as it seems, but there's just this scene keeps adding characters,
Yeah.
just like and people. It's
Yeah.
like,
Do you have a receipt?
No. I might have already said that. It was a gift.
I can give you store credit.
Well, I was expecting cash.
I'm sorry.
Isn't there a way we could work this out? Let me buy you a drink.
Slime. As
I
my
have an
mom would say.
expense account.
The best I can do is put the store credit in your name so you can spend it here.
I would think about spending it on you if you gave me cash. It's $22.
Store credit.
She's just not having it at
Yeah.
all. Like, so she doesn't even seem insulted. She's not. No.
He has the clout.
Just in case Matherton comes
Right.
back and you're looking for him, like. I love this moment. Like, yeah, look at what
Yeah.
I got. Nice, a gun.
Well, if he waited on them,
Yeah,
like,
yeah. Oh, they'll come to me.
How was that for?
It's for me. 22 caliber bolt action.
Use it. Feel good.
Why not? Boys for the boys, right?
boys
The
laugh.
chip and dip seems like that for that being $22 back in the day. That seems like a little high amount
His
of money.
Joker moment.
Yeah. You're literally pointing at people's faces in the office. I can't get over that.
Oh, she's in his sights.
Yeah.
Pretty goofy moment.
Yeah. Paul's probably a pacifist, so he's not into that.
I wonder who else would have been running at that time.
Nixon was really the presumptive nominee in 60. It was not all that competitive. I think Henry Cabot Lodge was his VP nominee, but him being the VP for 8 years, he was kind of like, I think by 56, because there's a really good little New Yorker article I read years ago from the 56 convention, that it was already about, well, we know he's going to be running in 4 years, so it was like a mini coronation then.
Yeah.
Now, the Democratic convention was a lot more competitive at this time than the Republican one was. Because LBJ was an outside chance, but it was mostly Hubert Humphrey and Kennedy and Adlai Stevenson kind of also angling in there because he'd been the nominee a few times.
Oh.
If it is Kennedy, Nixon will lower himself. Why would it be Kennedy? Good. Catholic son of a millionaire. A boy too scared to do anything to go on vacation. I met him. He is a boy.
Did you notice there's no space in the he is on the subtitles?
Free world for twice that time. He's inexperienced. He doesn't even wear a hat. I don't know.
Doesn't wear a hat.
Doesn't wear a hat. Elvis. That's what we're dealing with.
He's right.
He actually is, like, and that's what's funny. They're looking at him like, you're stupid.
America does not want some greasy kid with his finger on the button.
What was that wink about?
Yeah, yeah, he wasn't even looking at it.
Yeah.
And he's already thinking, I'm going to F you.
We'll talk about Kennedy and Nixon probably a little later on in the later episode in this season. But the whole irony is that Nixon was only 4 years older than Kennedy.
Yeah.
Everybody acts like it was drastic, but it wasn't all that much.
Kind of how they acted about the recent election about age.
4-year difference, yeah. It's kind of funny that back then, though, there was like men still in their like early to mid 40s, as opposed to now it's like like in a nursing home watching two old white guys fight over the last scoop of mashed potatoes is what it is now. But different era.
You thought it would be whatever, and then
It's just such a great shot.
Yeah. But they had to, though.
Yeah.
Aunt Letty.
Well, he should have just obviously just
Yeah.
got the store credit. Like, I love that the way this is shot. It's like he's just kind of like casually, and he's like, you know what? Actually, he just kind of comes up with the idea.
He's kind of like halfway thinking about it, but
You'll hear his.
You know where I can get some paperweights? Like,
his wacko fantasy here.
yeah, Wacko's wish.
Yes, yes.
They barely started, and he's like,
Yeah.
A wedding present.
Get on this now, please.
You ever been hunting, baby?
no.
I love that. Yeah, I don't think so. It's like, well,
It's an incredible sensation.
So if he's almost moved on in his fantasy, it's like, what is the game here? Like,
he just literally needs somebody to talk to, like Roger. Maybe they're not so different,
they and I.
Yeah, they and them.
They and them, yeah. I bet Pete Campbell's real hashtag they them kind of deal.
I mean, more progressive, as we'll talk about later on.
Hashtag me too is what needs to happen to him.
Well,
well, it happened to a lot of other people before him. Over time, he's not so bad. That's not really his problem exactly, but
don't you love that this is his fantasy when he's like the biggest city boy out of all these people in this?
That's why.
Yeah.
His valuable hunting knife, a la Guided by Voices. He wants to start a new life with his valuable hunting knife.
This woman, like not Trudy, not even you, this woman. Don't you love, by the way, that the episode description have specifically signaled out this scene as like, his fantasy?
Because it's so dang weird.
Yeah. You just imagine the Twin Peaks music behind this scene.
Yeah.
She's into it though. So I think at this stage she's still got a little bit of a crush on him. That's not going to last forever, obviously, but he should have ended all that with "That's what we're dealing with here" with her.
It would have been funny if she said when she walked out, she was like, real, I don't even know if I want to say what I'm thinking. I'm going to say it another way. Last week, I saw a film. If I do recall, it was a horror film.
As I recall, it was a horror film.
Right. The name of that song is what she was probably, I always wanted to eat more Danishes. It's kind of everything you want,
I had a cheese one the other day that was pretty good. Where was that at? Oh, that was at a meeting we had at school. Early morning meeting.
Early morning, our Monday morning.
Yeah.
Our Monday morning meltdown. It's weird how supermarkets used to look.
Yeah.
That weird light on her face.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah.
Like daggum Morticia Adams.
Yeah. Don't you love Betty was... Somebody was being inappropriate to Betty earlier, and she's going to get visited for being inappropriate with a child.
Mm-hmm.
Got very blue eyes, as Helen Bishop does.
Do you remember when you cut Mommy's hair?
Yeah. Glenn doesn't lie? Well, we know that's a lie later on.
That's her decision is to slap her. Meanwhile, just leave it all there. That's the funniest detail. I'm just leaving.
Yeah.
Anyway.
All puffed up. I've never ate oysters.
I've eat part of one once. No, I think I've eat fried oyster and I didn't really like it. He's not being so obviously weird.
Oh, yes. Let's have a good time. Nothing will happen.
I said there's that one click call article that's like, or game you can play where it's like, you eat more oysters. You eat more oysters. Like, Don and Roger eat more oysters. Like.
Yeah, that's officially called. And I'll put the link of this in the show notes. You're at dinner with your friends Don Draper and Roger Sterling. Can you eat the most oysters? So, like I said, Look for that link.
Oh, by the way, they eat cheesecake before the Olympic Games. Like,
oh, I love this, how wide ranging this conversation is.
Bring those dogs into space. I believe we branded them cat lovers and moved on to the subject of true love. Right. Desi and Lucy, please. He's divorcing her again. You wake up one morning and say, oh yeah, I forgot, I hate you.
That's funny.
The man married the same woman twice. I believe in his case, it was the lure of orange hair.
meanwhile,
I like redheads. Their mouths are like a drop of strawberry jam in a glass of milk.
he's like, what?
I think I woke my ulcer up. Drinking milk. Never liked it.
That's our mom.
I hate cows.
Do you think there's ever a point where he becomes legit drunk and he doesn't even remember exactly what this plan is, or is he just acting this entire time?
Acting, I think.
Yeah.
I think he can take more alcohol
Yeah.
than him as far as like before getting drunk,
Yeah.
because he ain't right
Yeah.
in the head. Just frankly, so
She's like, let me try this drinking deal a little bit. Just
wine.
think
in
about
the
that's
day.
just what her day was before the doorbell rang.
Yeah. What, just sitting drinking wine
And smoking, yeah.
and fighting people? You know, she came over because of that.
Oh, yeah, it was the same. Yeah, she's fishing for stuff.
Yeah, literally an excuse to come over.
Yeah. She's pregnant during this time.
Yeah.
Still, right? So, yeah.
No, she's just that big.
Yeah.
No, she's pregnant.
Just saying drinking wine
Yeah.
during that. No. What?
Recon. Decon is on its knees to sponsor the insect zoo here in the old hardware store. We can't lose.
R.I.P.
I don't know what happened. Really? Because I do.
Whatever you heard, I know the whole town's talking.
Notice
She's so selfish.
Notice use of the word poke earlier. Poke to death. Poke here.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
I'm
Yeah, he
But
probably went in there because she was in
Yeah.
there.
But I love, don't you know, she's so selfish.
Yeah.
Like, why? How?
She's like, wait, you hate Kennedy?
The
Which
neighborhood's against her.
the coven has met. Like,
That's what it's all about, isn't it?
Tell me more about that. Still dying to try it. I'm pretty sure Dr. Wayne tried to look down my neck while I Labor Day. Sits behind me. And as far as I'm concerned, as long as my name's Eva, I'm wearing my key.
This is something else. This could change everything. You should leave.
Speaking of preggers, Peggy will be having that problem soon. Again.
Well,
I mean, not again, but just to mention it again, I guess.
I don't think earlier, like her like going for the Danish was in part like, oh, she's like got a sexual reaction or craving of sorts. But I was thinking also that might be like foreshadowing that she's, she might be, having literally cravings, or she's going to start slowly putting on a little bit of weight over the course of this season for that.
I'm terribly sorry, Mrs. Short. It's certainly a believable excuse. Maybe go back to lunch. No. Cooper had a seizure. He has
How many flights that is, I can't remember. It's like 20.
I feel like it's more than that. I can't remember. Like 30 or 40, I think. I don't remember. Maybe it is 20.
ridiculous. Building this big, what if there was a fire? We'll be walking down.
They said through 24, actually.
Maybe they're late too. Maybe we could get them to come down and have a presentation on the 8th floor landing. There's plenty of seats. Well, what are we gonna do? We're almost there. The hell we are. Well, we can waste another 5 minutes talking about it if you want. Get behind me.
What, his large chest?
Don Draper's large chest or large ass.
Six to go.
21, or no, I'm sorry. 7 plus 6 is 13?
Yeah.
Okay. 23.
Maybe, man.
So how they just stand there like, huh?
Big breasts.
Large chest.
Want me to run ahead? Run? My name's in the building. Take it away from me.
It's like, it's not really that many floors.
Yeah.
Like,
I'm fine. Lost my tight slip. I'll find it. Go on. You sure? I said go on. Found it.
that slime.
A picture of health here.
Yep.
Anyways.
How are you? Elevators out. It's quite high. Where's Sterling? Let's go. Oh, here are the troops now. Lou, Michael, Charlie, Don Draper. Hey, Don. Our creative muscle. Hopefully a little brains, too. Try to keep your fellows waiting. The elevator's out. Pete Campbell, of course. We've spoken on the phone. Yeah. He'll continue handling.
How fake that
Yeah.
looked.
Anyway.
And of course, my partner, Roger Sterling. We heard the elevator's down.
How white he looks.
Yeah.
Talk about you all right, Roger? Get us some ice water. Oysters. I can see that. 3 floors. I'm just sorry I missed this lunch. We were with some Quakers. Had cottage cheese. Well, let's let Roger regroup.
Wow. That's literally like...
That's kind of a reference to like Nixon being a Quaker, and then like one of his famous like last meals in the White House before he resigned was he ate cottage cheese. Like,
he used to eat, I think, like cottage cheese and ketchup together or something. Have you heard about that?
Yeah.
He knows.
Yeah. Good. Nice. Got him.
What is this song? So bad. Like,
again, that's similar to what we said about some other episodes. Kind of a David Chase ending to an episode there.
Very like, well, it's over, so.
That's over. Go home. Oh, wait, you are home. But anyways.
Yep.
So that's red in the face. Are you feeling red in the face, Levi?
No. You know what's funny is it's called red in the face, but then actually they're white in the face.
I know. It's like, whoa, what's going on here?
Well, he is anyway.
Yeah.
All right, so pretty good episode, pretty hilarious episode. I think it's by far, obviously, the most comedic so far, outwardly. I actually feel like, in its own way, the show would never quite be that outwardly funny again in an episode.
Yeah, I'd say, like, really,
the
only, like, really dramatic stuff, I feel like, is the stuff between Don and Betty. And him confronting her after Roger being there. But everything else, it's fairly light and comedic. There's, like, this... I would say sharp, and some would say maybe dark undercurrent of what's going on between Don and Roger, but on the whole, pretty comedic.
Okay, so we'll do our awards. Lucky Strike Championship for who won the episode.
It's toasted.
This is going to be a lot harder than I think who lost it, because I think that's pretty clear.
I'm going to say Don on this one, Donald Draper. The Donald.
Should I just start writing the Donald? No, of course not. Because he's not even the Donald. I mean,
he's not the Donald.
He is not Donald.
That just like him scheming and like him using this as an opportunity to assert his dominance against Roger. Again, not necessarily the best moral or ethical thing to do.
No.
But we'll find this with Don Draper. There's times where he's going to be quote unquote winning, where how he's doing so is not necessarily through the best means.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. So I'm going to go with Don on this one.
Part of me wants to say Don, but I kind of want to go Betty on this one, actually.
Okay.
Because she, even though she kind of like looks bad in quotes to Don as far as, oh, you encourage this, blah, 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 like, she, I think, has a random self-worth about herself that she tells to Francine, kind of in that one scene of saying, yeah, I kind of do what the men want me to do, and she's like, and then sometimes I kind of take joy in that, and saying, in its own sick sort of way, I think is kind of in sad sort of way, is kind of a win for her, actually, as far as being... and she's not a stupid person. I don't believe Betty Draper's a stupid person. Yeah. But being obviously, wise enough to know, I'm kind of...
I have a certain level of ceiling of potential in my life. And specifically that, I think that scene is really good between her and Francine about talking about her... implicitly saying that beauty she knows is a currency that she has to work with in the world. So, I'd go with, I think that's a good, I'm going with Don, but I think Betty's a good choice as well.
So, Don Draper wins the Lucky Strike Championship for Kyle. Betty Draper wins it for me. All right, Secor Laxative Award for who lost the episode.
They do. Every commercial block on air in the land of Lincoln is clogged up with laxative buys.
I think you're going to say it for both of us here. I don't know who else it could be.
Well, really quickly, I will say a very, very honorable mention to Pete.
Yeah.
Because I think the whole situation with the chip and dip and the rifle is an L for him, but it's got to be Roger Sterling.
Oh, yeah,
of course,
definitely.
loses this episode because he comes off really bad to Don, to Betty. Like that again, as we said, this ends up creating a rift that's going to last for like another 2.5 seasons between these two men.
Yeah.
That eventually is put to bed, and they do kind of become more friends than not. But and then, like, before some important clients, like, totally pukes up what he was just eating. I mean, that is just obviously bad on a whole host of levels. So I'd say Roger Sterling taking that
definitely.
L. It's the first L he's taken, I think.
Yeah, but it's a double one. I mean, it's definitely him for me. I mean, yeah, like, you want to talk about losing an episode, you don't lose any harder than that. I think this is the worst anybody's lost an episode so far.
I agree.
Like, I don't know if anybody will be able to lose an episode more than this, other than like Lane Price when he commits suicide. Not even to make a joke. That's just like, dang. The level of loss this is like so stratospheric.
And again, I think Roger's the easy one to go with, and that's definitely who I want to go with too. Pete, also Helen Bishop. I mean, not great look for her either. You know,
even though she's right.
Well, she is right in terms of. Betty shouldn't have given Glenn her hair. That is very weird. But nonetheless, I mean, she kind of drops off the face of the show for the most part after this. Is not. I mean, I don't think the show in season 1 ever positioned her exactly as a major character, but she definitely was seen as, a little bit of an alternative character, I think, that could have, is represent something, then she kind of drops off from there. It's not really going to be fundamentally part. Honestly, it would have been interesting if later in the show she popped back up again and we saw her at another stage of, a little bit later, but never happens, really.
Yeah. Yeah.
But anyways, Roger definitely loses. I'm just some other people that talk about, too.
Yeah. Yeah, because, I mean, it'll go on with... Obviously, Glenn as a character, but I guess this is her last episode, isn't she? Again, or
is she like in the background or seen at some point later in season 1?
Maybe,
but this is definitely like her first last, like where she's really got a scene in there. So
all right, so Secor laxatives all the way for Roger Sterling. In fact, if it would have come out the other way, it really would have been a Secor laxative award. All right, Mohawk Airlines plaque for the most shocking moment in this episode. There's actually 3 that I'm thinking of.
I'm sorry. Am I bothering you?
What's going on?
I just got off the phone with my brother. It's the strangest thing. Apparently my father was on that plane.
What?
You go with what you
I don't know which to pick, is what I'm saying, because I'll go ahead and lay it out. The 3 are, of course, him vomiting.
Yeah.
The second one is just the entire, the buying the air rifle, and 3 is Helen Bishop getting slapped.
Yeah.
Like, that's literally 3 possible combinations of which of those to do. And so I think I am actually gonna go with. I just have to go with Roger vomiting. I mean, that's just it. I mean,
I feel like I want to go with another one too, but I think that's the one. I'll go with that also, Roger vomiting, because again, I will say I think a very close second for me, and I agree with all 3 of those. It would be Pete with the rifle. Just in the sense of like bringing into the office this thing that is not supposed to be here.
Yeah.
And again, like, especially guy walks into an advertising agency later, something very extreme and violent happens, and that this is the very first inclination that something like that could happen in the office. Doesn't happen here, but the fact that he's just pointing the gun around and we see that first person POV shot of him looking down the barrel and like pointing it always, it's usually at women too, specifically, is like this violent thing. But again, the pure shock of literally vomiting in front of a client, literally your lunch, is just so obviously awful. So Roger's just really taking some L's
also
on this one,
I guess we're of course forgetting him coming on to Betty too is very shocking. I mean, it is, but it's kind of part and parcel with what we've seen so far. But I think what's shocking about it is it's happening in Don Draper's home when he's not invited. Also, the story or the fantasy that he tells about wanting to have a woman cook dinner for him. Like, There actually is randomly a lot of stuff in this episode
Yeah.
that's like this, that. I mean, you know.
And then
so-
again, to talk about the Betty Helen thing for a second too, just like I love too that. Did you notice like pretty much in those shots in the supermarket, it's exclusively women.
Yeah.
So in the middle of the day in a supermarket during this time, it would have been exclusively the domain of women,
Right.
Other than men who would have worked there, but just and that like the reactions of the other women, like just kind of shaking their heads, and then immediately gets back to Francine, who later has that conversation or scene with Betty.
Right.
So all those are really good contenders, but the sheer image of Roger vomiting is just so wow. Okay, it's like it literally feels like a violent event's taking place,
and the I mean, literally the sound is everything about that's got to be it. I mean, I guess. All right, so that's pretty. We're voting pretty similar on these. It seems. So the Roger vomiting up oysters for Mohawk Airlines plaque for both of us. The most shocking event of the episode. All right, Patchy Palm for favorite cultural reference.
This is Patchy.
There were a couple I do remember.
One that I'm going to go with is, and we're going to see more of this in some future episodes this season with these conversations about Nixon and Kennedy, but I think just that one scene of where they're talking about, Elvis, that's what we're talking about here, of Pete just like, and how Pete comes off looking stupid in that scene, but that Pete is onto something in terms of America over the course. I mean, one of the defining traits of the 1960s, and there's a lot of narratives and there's a lot of themes, is the obsession with youth. And that starts from the very beginning with the Nixon and Kennedy election in 1960, and that, Kennedy's election is going to fundamentally project this sense of youth and optimism into the country that over the course of the 1960s is going to take on a lot of different forms, but it really all begins with this kid who's not really prepared, doesn't know what he's doing, and this comparison to Elvis. Very rich, kind of, it's not a very long scene, but it's one that really is also doubles as this little secret rivalry that's taken place between Don and Pete over the course of this season, where Don is very much more so the Nixon and Pete's more so the Kennedy here, of kind of setting up that division between, I'm older than you, I'm smarter than you, but I'm actually not super older than you.
Yeah. Well, also the idea of like
it's obsession with youth. Obviously,
Nixon growing up kind of in a farm area of California, similar to Don, somebody who had to work really hard to get where they were.
Pete/Kennedy, meanwhile,
was
born with a golden
everything,
spoon, and that whole. So that's a very rich kind of conversation that is part of this larger narrative going on in this season in particular. So I'd say that.
Yeah. I think that's a great one. Mine's a little more simple, I guess, and I haven't even read the book, but The Naked and the Dead, as being even at all referenced in terms of this an air rifle being, and it's like, it's real Naked and the Dead will be like, just very like.
I have read that book, and it is actually pretty great World War II book. But Norman Mailer, friend of the pod. Friend of the show.
He probably would be if we asked him, but
I wonder what he would have thought of this show.
I'm sure he probably loved it. I would think.
Yeah,
I don't know.
He would have. He very likely he would have liked it.
Yeah. So Patchy Palms go to Pete saying Kennedy equals Elvis. That was Kyle's, and mine's the Naked and the Dead reference. Quite an episode, I gotta say.
It is.
Lots going on.
It is. But then I look at the next few.
Yeah.
We said this last time, but I'm going to go through this again. The Hobo Code, Shoot, Long Weekend, Indian Summer, Nixon versus Kennedy, and The Wheel. I'll just go ahead and say it. This is where Mad Men really becomes Mad Men, I would say, in terms of just like these are all like home run episodes. Like, especially the Hobo Code, I feel like is very, very strong.
Yeah.
Just to read that really quickly, what happens here. Pete Campbell and Peggy Olson starred in Office Romance. Well, maybe kind of already embers of that. Peggy's copy for the lipstick account goes over well, and the men in the firm congratulate her. A new telephone receptionist, Lois Sadler, takes a liking to Salvatore Romano, but his own interests seem to lie elsewhere. Don Draper gets an unexpected bonus from Burt Cooper and wants to take Midge on a surprise trip to Paris. She seems too involved with her beatnik friends, however. Don reflects on his unhappy childhood, and in flashbacks, he reveals some life lessons he learned early on when a hobo spent the day working on the family farm in exchange for a meal. That's a lot going on just in that one there. But, I mean, wouldn't you agree that all these coming up are going to be pretty big?
Yeah, I'm looking at them.
Episodes.
Yeah. We kind of have a little bit of a nadir in terms of some of that stuff, and when you have long weekends, kind of a off episode for some of that a little bit.
Yeah.
Mainly, the main thing of that is like the peak Dawn continuation of some of their arguments. And then Indian Summer is almost like a setup for Nixon versus Kennedy, and that's like, you know, the big one. Shoot is another like pretty big episode in
especially
terms
for Betty.
For Betty, yeah, and a lot about some about Peggy, stuff in there about her weight gain and that being, you know, end up finding out that's her.
Yeah.
Shoot is another one of those episodes a lot of people talk about as, oh, this shocking kind of, you know, moment happened, the ending of that. And that's when Jim Hobart first comes in, so that's obviously like a massive thing for the show in terms of long term.
Yeah, and that's something that obviously in the beginning you have no clue is really going to be a ongoing character who's going to pop up a few more times. But then when you look back on it, it's like, oh, that's actually something that's going on in the background of the whole show that we'll talk about there. But some great ones coming up.
Yep.
We're going to do episode rankings obviously by the end, but where do you think this one's stacked up so far in this season?
Looking here at the list, I mean, I think this will be a little bit more difficult. Like, I think it'll be easier to rank episodes as the show goes, like in other seasons, because I was kind of looking here. I think this would be one of the more favorite ones for me, I think, because of the tone is very specific. But also, I mean, New Amsterdam and Babylon and 5G are also really great ones. So, yeah, I don't know. I was thinking we need to
like you said, like I feel like
that.
Other seasons, there's episodes that distinguish themselves a little more, and we're still in the building the foundation of what the show is, so it kind of runs together maybe slightly more. But that's going to do it for this episode of Blowing Smoke. This is Kyle.
This is Levi.
Take care. God bless. And David, take it away.
Yep. And also, before we get there, David, go eat some cheesecake in honor of David Lynch. Just because it was talked about in this episode, and I kind of want some cheesecake right now. So,
do that.
And the next time I smoked dope, Bob Dylan was playing, you know, at this big place right down the street. And so, lo and behold, out of thousands of people in this, you know, auditorium kind of thing, which was real steep, I was way in the back. Out of all those seats, when I sat down, there was this girl sitting next to me that I'd just broken up with. Then Bob Dylan came out on the stage, and I couldn't believe how little he was. And I measured him with my fingers on my knee, and I said to her, his jeans are only this big. Then I measured his guitar. I says, his guitar is only this big. And I wasn't even digging the music. It was so far away. So I wanted to get out of there really bad. Then when the concert was over and Peter came back with a bunch of his friends, he said, nobody walks out on Dylan. I said, I walk out on Dylan. Get the fuck out of here. And so that was the end of Peter is my roomie.
And that concludes our broadcast day.